Hello, hello. The title says Gameplay Audit. I've done these in the past for myself. I just logged onto League of Graphs. I typed in my friend's name, Unreal Deal. It's his Xbox Live handle from what I remember. Um, he used to be known as The Real Deal, a rogue on the Khadgar server in World of Warcraft. He changed his name to Unreal Deal, and he's been going by Unreal Deal as his gamer tag ever since, and that was probably around, you know, 2010 or something, because, I believe he was the real deal when Burning Crusade originally came out. Um, it looks like he played 3 hours ago in a solo queue. So he is playing by himself, and I don't know. Here's a normal victory. Um, I don't recognize any of the people that he used to play with. There was XX Brolick. So this is actually someone I went to high school with. We weren't really friends in high school, but I met him again through my friend Chris and um, his group of League of Legends players. So my friend Chris and Tim and Matt started playing League of Legends probably around, I want to say 2012, 2013. It was probably 2013, 2014, because it was after the release of Diablo. And I remember they kind of like, there was an exodus from Diablo to League of Legends. You know, they stopped playing Diablo and they started playing League of Legends. This guy is Matt Vaughn, I believe his last name is. Um, and I see his account. So he's level 626. It looked like my friend Chris there was 205. He played 4 days ago in a solo queue. Um, but these are, it looks like he's playing with some of his, this Rockthar is my friend Chris's friend Sean Powers. He's got a level 351. And he played 3 days ago. Um, Sean is married and I believe has children. Then there's Pew, and this is level 655. I don't know if this is their friend John or if this is my former friend Matt. Um, he's level 655, and so their rankings are, they play ranked. This guy's gold 4, that guy was in bronze. This is Rolick. Let's see if I recognize. I don't. I don't recognize this. Be nice to me. I don't know who that is. Um, Shudette Burley. I don't know who that is. And Love and Pride. I don't know who that is. So they are playing. Um, Let me see if it. Here's a 3 with Brolick, Rockthar, and Pew. This is Finish Blazing. I don't know who that is. And Gummy Shark. I don't know who that is. So it looks like these 3 will queue together. And it's my understanding that Brolick and Rockthar played some Diablo 3 seasons. I recall them remarking on one of the Diablo seasons, and they said it wasn't that good. But that, that kind of speaks to my friendship with them because I played Diablo 3, and I wasn't included in their seasonal quest. I was more a solo queue myself. I had originally played the game with my friend Mike Levine, my friend Matt, my friend Tim, and my friend Chris. Chris was a warlock. Levine was a monk. I was a demon hunter. I believe Tim was a barbarian, and actually don't know what the other Matt was, um, but he was not a demon hunter. I guess I was a demon hunter. And Matt would play Diablo 3 to up to the point of like he didn't play Reaper of Souls, which was the expansion to Diablo 3. I remember him talking about doing these resplendent chest runs. The original Diablo 3 didn't have features that kind of differentiated from Diablo 2. It's my understanding Diablo 2, if you want some sort of loot, you do like a Baal run, a Mephisto run, you open up a portal and you farm bosses or you farm certain areas. Um, for Diablo 3, it was basically you farm axe. I recall um, the remote auction house. That was a big thing when Diablo came out. You can sell items for real money, and basically it was just legendaries were so rare, and it was just farming the game, repeating certain levels, repeating certain bosses or whatever. But then Reaper of Souls, we got rifts and we got bounties. And to me that changed the game to where it was playable on a repetitive basis. Legendaries became more frequent, and there was more to do in the game. Um, all those guys. I don't know if Pew 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 and Brolic, I don't know if they played World of Warcraft, but I believe Sean Powers did. I believe his rogue was I Am the Walrus, or Matador, I think was another one. That Matador might have been Scott Conway, who was another person I associated with, who had a rogue named Corrupt. I'm wondering if this was a purchased account because the way um, it worked was he rolled a rogue on the Khadgar server. He leveled it to max level. We were in college, and then he applied to my guild with a transfer rogue. So it wasn't. It was some other rogue from a different server that I guess was a second level 60. And at that time, it took incredibly long for you to level characters. And he came back with this transfer character. He had gear that he didn't even you know have the possibility of obtaining on the Khadgar server. He had Viscag, he had some Bloodfang and stuff, and I recall a situation where uh, he and Sean Powers paid my guild gold to carry them through Blackwing Lair for items, and I guess that's a tradition still done today. So people complaining about like gold DKP and paying for weapons and stuff, that's been in the game since vanilla. Um, I remember it was remarkable because we did Blackwing Lair. We were carrying them through Blackwing Lair, and myself and this rogue Unearthed were tasked with disarming traps in the suppression room. And I get a message like, Scott and Sean says they're beating you in DPS. Well, of course they're beating me in DPS. I'm disarming traps, and I guess around that time I had a reputation for being top DPS type thing. And but this video is more about um, who's still playing video games at their age, right? So those guys born 1987 are going to be 40 next year. And we see that 3 of them from this group are playing together as recent as 4 days ago, 23 days ago, 30 days ago, 30 days ago, 30 days ago, 36 days ago. And then we have one who played recently, as 3 hours ago, 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago, 7 hours ago, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 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 days ago, 6 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 days ago. Now, these ones that are 6 days ago, let's assume they're all on the same day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 23 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, hour and 20 minutes, hour and what was I say? Hour and 20, hour 30, hour 50. So this is like 2 hours of play. And for League of Legends games, they can go on for like 45 minutes. Um, so now we're going to go to Noisy Box. That is my account. And I got the little Halloween thing here. And it says unranked. If I were to log onto my account, it says level 34. Now, I recall paying for runes. So Riot has a pay model where you can buy skins, and they can also buy runes. I don't think runes are still in the game anymore. There was no competitive advantage. There was a time-saving advantage because the runes I purchased went into my talent sheet, and they expedited the process that I could play ranked games or whatever. So you needed to be a certain level in order to play competitive level. Let's say it's 20 or 30, and I got to that level and I started playing with my friends. So level 34, how long does it take to level in League of Legends? Reaching level 30 takes about 35 to 40 hours of playtime with an XP boost, or roughly 70 to 75 hours of normal play without a boost. This takes around 130 to 150 total matches, spanning anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months depending on your daily grind. I logged on to my account in 2018 to discover, well, actually, no. I guess what happened was I used a site like League of Graphs here, and I saw that my account had Nami playing. So there was, it tells you which characters you play. So let's go back to Unreal Deal here. He's playing a Mumu. And he's got Blitzcrank in his photo here. And there's like Lucius or something. I forget who this guy is. No, Lucius is the other one. So this is Blitzcrank here. That's Thresh. And so I went on one of these sites and I looked up my account, and I saw that Nami was playing. And Nami is a support, and I don't play support. The only positions I play are top, which would be a character like Garen, Renekton, or Shyvana, or I play middle, and I typically would play as a Kali or Ari in middle. And there might be some other ones like all the surgeon outfits like Kennen and Shen. You know, if they had a cool outfit, I like playing the cool outfits. I never jungled. There might have been one game I attempted to, but I never, ever played support, and I never, ever played ADC. I never played support. I don't play support in League of Legends. I wouldn't find that to be fun. This down here, this looks like ARAM. So this is a game mode where you're given a random character, and you play on the bridge here. But I had to contact Riot and inform them that my account was compromised, and so they changed the account security. The friends list was even changed. Like the names weren't the same when I logged on. I didn't recognize who the people were. So it was normal for my friends and I to play video games. Um, a lot of them I was introduced to in high school. So I used to play football. I played football in grade school, like sixth, seventh, eighth grade. And then in high school, I played freshman and sophomore year. I tried out for the team my junior year. I got cut from the team. I didn't try out my senior year. But after being cut junior year, I started associating with individuals who played Halo. And I wound up buying a Microsoft Xbox. And eventually, I would go to a video game tournament called Halo 50K, and my friend and I would host a website for the P Clan, for because back then, Halo Combat Evolved did not have Xbox Live, but it shipped with the feature, you know, like I guess it was intended to have Xbox Live. So the way around this was you could trick your Xbox into thinking that there was a LAN setup. You connect it to your router, and you have your PC connect to your router. You change some of the port settings, and you connect Xboxes online over Xbox Connect. And so my friends and I, the reason why I can memorize my friend's cell phone number is because I called him. We both had Verizon cell phone numbers, so we had unlimited Verizon to Verizon calling at that time. That used to be a thing. Like you only had, like, if I called somebody else, I wouldn't have unlimited minutes if I called someone who had an AT&T contract. So we both had Verizon. We had unlimited, Verizon to Verizon calling, and we would be on the phone almost every single night playing Halo. And then Xbox Live came out. We played Halo 2. Xbox 360 would eventually come out, and there would be Gears of War, and basically the first-person shooter crown was taken by Call of Duty. A lot of my floor mates in college came into my room and played Call of Duty, and that was before Modern Warfare. This was like Call of Duty 3, and a lot of rifles and stuff. And I used to keep an audit. So the newer games have, now records of your gameplay time. Steam has a nice feature that lets you know how much time you've played a game. And my entire library might have over 100 games, but 250 hours or less of gameplay. And given how long I've had my Steam account and some of those games, like some of those games go back to when I had a Sony Vaio 15-inch laptop back around 2011. I was playing Defense Grid. I played about 40 hours of Defense Grid, and so that account was around 2011. And so now it's 2026, it's 15 years later. That's 250 hours over 15 years. My Overwatch account, um, Unfortunately, the game reset where there was Overwatch 1 and then Blizzard announced Overwatch 2, and rather than have them as two separate entities, they decided to get rid of Overwatch 1. I don't know why. I don't even know why Overwatch 2 exists at this point because the features that I was expecting in Overwatch 2 were player versus environment, where Tracer, can get upgraded nades and stuff and more bullets in her cartridge, and you play with other people. And they had some PvE in the original Overwatch where they had retribution and these things where you go on these missions and you shoot robots and stuff. But the game is primarily a 6v6 player versus player game that's MOBA-esque in that you have there are features that are considered where it's like a MOBA but it's first person, so it's a first person MOBA shooter, and it's similar to like Counter Strike in that it's basically just multiplayer exclusive. Um, they used to have seasons. Maybe they had 20 seasons in the first Overwatch, and I played pretty much all of them. But my gameplay time was basically to maintain my account because after every season they awarded you competitive points. After a certain amount of competitive points, I believe it was 3,000, you can purchase gold weapons. And several of my characters have these gold weapons, and so it you might have been awarded one competitive point after one game, but you might have been awarded like 500 after a season, depending on where you ranked. So I would play the placement matches, which might take me an hour, and seasons lasted about 60 days. So my gameplay time might be about 5 hours a month or less. I mean, I can go through it. There's still some of the data present, um, and I still have screenshots of the old account and whatnot. But then eventually they had Overwatch 2, and it still keeps a track, still has the same statistics. It has your total gameplay. So let's say you play Overwatch 1 for 400 hours, which was about how much I played. When I remember it being like 353 at one point, and so let's say it's 400 hours from 2016 to 2022. When Overwatch 2 gets released, now it says I have 400. So what did I say? 400. So let's say I have 400 hours played from Overwatch 1. When Overwatch 2 came out, as soon as the game launched, it said I had 400 hours played. So it included my data, but it reset ELO, which is the season ranking system. So everybody was reset to like 1500. So if you were like a 4600, top ranked player in your area, that got reset. So now you were 1500, and you had to make the climb all over again. And all other statistics, the seasons were erased. Your performance was erased. Like how good you were at a certain character and whatnot, and your season rankings. Um, Diablo 3 had seasons, and I remember like when I was working at a place called Catholic Charities in 2016 and 2017, they were around season 17, and I remember playing 54 hours in a season, and you know that let's say I think they're longer than 60 days. They might be 80 days. Um, but I don't think 54 hours is a lot. Basically, the way I would play Diablo, it would be like clumps. Like I would level a character, and get gear to a certain point, and then just kind of stop. So like that 54 hours, that might have been in one weekend or 1 or 2 weekends. Like it would have been in a short period of time. And I remember talking to my employer about, he's like, "Do you like to drink? And do you like to play video games?" And he was asking me, "Do you like to play video games?" on the heels of one of these weekends where I played, X number of hours of Diablo. And This was at a house in, I guess, Islip or Bayshore. I was working with young children, and like, my coworker would come in and just, he's like, I'm gonna watch video game clips today. I'm like, okay. I absolutely love like fantasy. Like, I love the aesthetics of Diablo and World of Warcraft. I love armor. I love Bushido armor, medieval armor, fantasy armor, and it's a big, it's a big reason why I was a fan of like Boba Fett. Boba Fett doesn't say a word in Star Wars, and like I'm a fan because he's got cool armor. It's how I rank villains and like versus heroes and stuff. Vader's outfit is cool. Um, and like comic book Ultron looks cool and stuff. Um, I used to collect Magic the Gathering, and this was I was in kindergarten, and my mother started buying me Magic the Gathering. So this had to be in 1993, and she started buying me Magic the Gathering, and like one of the first sets I recall was well, I had the Dark, and I had some Antiquities, and I had some Fourth Edition, and there was a set called Ice Age, and there's a card. It's a black card, and it's like a 2/1 creature, and my friend, I never knew how to play the game. I never learned how to play the game, but I would say that this was the most powerful card in the game because it was cool looking to me. So this was the Knight of Stromgald. He's a 2/1 creature, costs 2 black mana, protection from white, and you get +1/+0 until the end of the turn, and you get first strike until the end of the turn. I guess first strike is when your character attacks first rather than like simultaneously, so his damage would be applied first. So let's say their creature is 3/2. That 3 would kill this guy, but you pay 2, 4, 6 mana to make this a 5, or you can pay 4 mana to make this a 4/1 creature, and a fifth mana to have first strike, and then that would kill the other creature. I think that's how that works. I learned a little bit. I did eventually attempt to play, but I liked Magic more for the artwork. I collected it because I liked the way they looked. My favorite set is the Legends set. And probably around like 2015, I was associating with Scott Conway and this guy Matt and some other guys, this Kevin Kukler, and we played Magic. So I had went into a hobby shop. I decided to buy some boosters. I was looking for, after excising fantasy sports and some other things, I was looking for something, a new watering hole, and photography crossed my mind, and I thought, maybe I'll collect, Magic again. And I kind of wish I kept up with it because there are a lot of people who go to these hobby shows. Pokemon is big again. And it's not that I want to strike rich or something. It's something to do, to go out and hang out and talk about cards and stuff. Um, trade sports cards, trade Magic cards, trade Poke. I don't want to trade Pokemon. I don't like the look of those cards, but those seem to be the big money makers now. Um, So behind me is my new my new mini split, and it's great because the other unit was so loud. It was 55 decibels. This is like its max setting is 51, so it's lower, but it's operating around 45 decibels right now, and it's cooler in here. They came in today to install it. I had this room painted. They're coming tomorrow to touch up some of there's some spots above. There's a little chip on the molding there. That was done by me. I put up these temporary blinds. They painted over the moldings rather than sand them and prep them, and which I'm a little disappointed because like when the guy came over, he said, you know, like he was talking about different levels of paint, and he says I can use this type of paint that kind of masks the imperfections on the wall, and there's this other paint that, you know, in order to use that paint, you would need a lot of prep work and stuff. And I said, well, I kind of want this room to be pristine. I want that prep work because I had contacted another company, CertaPro, and they kind of sold me on like, you know, it's all in the prep work, and you know, they gave me a quote, and you know, I was tempted to go with them, but this guy had done some other projects around the home, and you know, keeping his business allows me to, like he put a cat door for Carmela. He fixed my fence, um, which I think eventually I'll have to do the whole thing. But there were some areas where like Shelby got through to my neighbors over here, um, and I'm asking if he can build a bench over here by my bay window. But above it, there are little patches. You can kind of see it. Let's see if I can get my hand. So right here, this area wasn't done completely, but the paint from the molding got stripped by these temporary blinds. So he's coming tomorrow to touch it up. He's still got to do the entryway here. He didn't do these moldings over here. As far as the color, I'm also a little disappointed. I have this Secret Labs desk here that has this silver suede, and I wanted to color match it, and I kind of wanted the walls to mimic the suede look to it, where you know, have peaks and valleys where it's a little brighter, a little, you know, darker, and you know, where it would look suede. He told me that that couldn't be done, and they couldn't color match it because Sherwin-Williams said that their laser wouldn't be able to pick it up. It would just come out black. So I managed to have them color match my mouse here. And I don't know if you can see, but like in this video, it looks a different color now. And I do have the swatch. And then I'm kind of having them come in to do, so this is the swatch, and even this doesn't look, but it does look like it, you know, it looks close to this thing. So they did color match this to a degree. We had picked out another paint. I hope they didn't just give us that other paint. Then I'm getting blinds with zebra blinds with silver mist, and it's not the worst actually. This is the first time I looked at it from like this. Typically I've just been holding it against the wall, but I wanted the gray to be more uniform. So there are little imperfections above the window that they didn't take care of. There looks like some stuff on the ceiling, and right around here, right around here, there seems to be some yellow on the wall, and I was wondering if that was actually the roof having a leak, because I'm pretty sure they painted the ceiling like and it looks in such a way that it doesn't look like, oh, they just missed a spot. So, and then I kind of want to put vinyl floors in here. Um, the original setup was probably better. Um, there were a few things I wanted to reduce the amount of clutter with wires and stuff. So like that's kind of how this whole project started, where I had a laptop and all the wires, the peripherals and stuff, use USB wires that connect to the side of the laptop. They don't make laptops anymore with the plugs in the back. So everything comes from the side, and I had so many things between a microphone, webcam, the monitor, and the headphone amplifier, and there might have been that I just had all these wires sticking out of the side of the computer. I decided to get a computer that had more I/O in the back and also in the front if I need to connect things. So I landed on Mac Studio, and that's an M1 Mac Studio. So like now they have the M4 Mac Studios. Like if they had the M4 Mac, I'm sorry, Mac Mini. If they had an M4 Mac Mini back when I bought the M1 Studio, I probably would have purchased that because the cost for a M1 Max studio, I don't, it was just basically I/O stuff. Um, doesn't come with a monitor, um, and the performance gain, for my needs, a Mac Mini might have sufficed, but it didn't have the I/O that I wanted. Um, the other thing about having it, like if I had a Mac Mini at this point, like the newer ones, it could fit into the tray in the Secret Labs desk. I haven't shaped my beard in quite some time. Um, so I think this will look a lot better once those temporary blinds come down. Of course, they don't look all that bad, um, but I think they certainly look better than the previous temporary blinds. And now they had opened the window when they came to do the paint, and the saga having this room painted, so I was gonna have it painted for $1,000. I said, like that's a cost. Like I was so concerned about the cost being that low that I anticipated a shitty job. Like I said, that seems too good to be true. I'm being quoted at 4,400 by Certa Pro, and the other, some of the other quotes I have are like 2,500, 2,900, and this guy's coming in at 1,000, and it just seemed too low. But then I said, you know what? I'll just pay it, and like that's also a cost. If it is too low, I'll have it redone. Um, but the issue was we had the snowstorm, so they were prepped to come on like a Saturday before the snowstorm in January or something, and see, he said it was going to be like a multi-day project, so he decided not to come. Now, that's when silver tanked. So like, I have silver and gold and palladium and platinum and samarium and nickel and copper and whatnot, and silver was $116 an ounce, and I was going to sell some of that to pay for this project, and I also had I don't have a car, so like transporting my safe to field offers for the silver wasn't really something I could do. Um, I can't just go in with, hey, I have this silver, will you buy it from me, type thing. They want to look at it. Um, so I kind of missed out on moving my silver at a higher cost, at least $90. Um, and then, it just started tanking. So, but then I decided to call, these guys, and I wouldn't mind, but like, maybe I shouldn't be talking about his company, his business for what they did, but he worked on another project. So the fire department broke down my front door. I remember saying, no, 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 don't do it, don't do it. And they, I had Anderson Renewal come in here and they were going to charge 16,000. And I felt, as like a new homeowner, I felt like this was like a little bit of him nudging, like, this is the reality of owning a home. Like, this is how much it cost. And like this door right here was $4,000. And that's what I expected a door for the front to be. And then he's showing me like people's homes and stuff. This guy's doing like a $54,000 renovation, and it was going in my mind. I said, like, at what point do you not just level your home and reconstruct the thing? Because like to build a new home, 1,500 square foot home, I'm sure, I'm not that sure, but like it's my understanding that that might cost like $100,000, from scratch, and with like materials and stuff. So like, if you're pumping that much renovation into the home, do you just level it and just build the whole thing up again? So I had this guy, and he said he was going to fix it for $450, as well as there was a hole next to the door. So these walls, this home is very well insulated in both heat and sound. The heat insulation went down a little bit in this room because I have the sliding doors with the blinds in, so the gas in between the two window panes, I guess, isn't there to accommodate the blinds, but some of the walls are very flimsy. You put a little weight on it, and you you go right through the wall there. And so he fixed it, but he told me he would do the door and the hole for $450 for both. So they came and they fixed the door, but not really. Like my father wound up having to fix it when I was in prison, where he sanded down like it wouldn't shut properly. So he had to, sand the keyhole or something, the little nub for the whatever. And then they didn't fix the hole, so I had him come back later, and I got charged $650 for him to fix the hole and do something else. And then this room, so originally he quoted me at, I guess, 20 at maybe 2,600 for this room. And then he told me, I asked about the AC. I said, so I had an in-wall AC, and he asked, like, do you want me to take that out? And I said, yes. So he said that would be $850. I said, just do it. Just go ahead. So I believe that total brought us to like 3,400 for this room, and then he charged 3,700, and so that's more than advertised. Um, 2,600 for the paint, to paint the room, and then 850 for the AC. So I had been sleeping down here. This was my primary sleeping place, um, you know, for when I moved in and stuff. I attempted to sleep upstairs for a bit, but the road noise sleeping on the bed by the window, that noise just kind of echoes and hits you, and I don't know where people get, you know. So when I was looking for mini splits, I came across this company called Midea, Midea, and apparently it's the most energy efficient mini split available. I don't even see it on Amazon anymore. And so it had the highest Energy Star rating. So this wasn't just, you know, them tooting their own horn. This was, you know, the rating came from whoever does Energy Star, and they advertise their mini split as 19 decibels. This on its lowest setting is not 19. Well, this on its lowest setting, I have the decibel meter upstairs. Um, I think it comes in at like 44 decibels when I have this on, which is kind of equal to the the room noise with nothing on. Like I don't know how much of this thing is being picked up, but this is the highest setting, and this is the lowest setting. So I had increased the fan because it got a little warm in here, but I had also increased the temperature because it was actually cold in here, and so that's encouraging because it's cooling better than my old unit. Anyway, so I was looking up video game times. In order for me to get that decibel meter, I I had to order from Best Buy. So I have a decibel meter. My USB-C, my micro, it's not a USB-C, I'm sorry. It's a micro USB and it bent. So I need a new one, and I looked through some of the things and I don't seem to have it. And so like this is I'm okay with this because I said, you know, I, I I've attempted to downsize some of my things in the home. So I've been getting rid of some of these wires, and I basically adopted the principle, the philosophy. If I need it, I'll just buy it again. So things can be delivered same day or next day. Um, so if it's not being like if I don't miss it, kind of thing, like I feel it's not being used. Like I might have wires for things that I don't use. And if there ever comes a day that I do need to use that thing, then I can, you know, just buy the thing again. So the micro USB cable was $6.99, and like some people might skip over like to just buy um, a delivery thing for $6.99. Some people might just skip over that and just seem like wasteful. So I got another thing. I got I got Star Fox. I saw something where they said some people were saying Nintendo should just skip over this one. Um, Look at these guys on the back. He's so into it. Give him a little wave. Give him a little wave. This was a good game when it came out. I have no problem with them updating the visuals. They were needing an update. However, they updated the audio, and I feel that might lose some of the charm of the game. Because you know, I had that you know, like the radio coming in, and some of the music is similar to Zelda Ocarina of Time, and it's rated E for everyone. Good luck. I have the original. I have Star Fox 64. I guess there's one on the Super Nintendo. I have Star Fox 64. It came with the Rumble pack, and I remember going to the store to get it, and I thought my Switch 2 would just basically be a Mario Kart emulator. I said, I want to play Mario Kart. And the game that I got, this Mario Kart World Tour, it only takes 8 minutes of my time. Like I wanted to avoid, like, when I was in my clinical psychology PhD at Saybrook, and when I was studying at the Masters of Counseling at Seton Hall, I avoided watching television. I avoided playing video games. But there was a point where I just said, I just want something that's quick. A lot of video games are like time investments. Now you play The Witcher 3, you're spending 250 hours and stuff. Mario Kart, this world tour, takes me 8 minutes. Like I play like one or two matches, and that's it. And but I purchased this system specifically for that purpose, and so Star Fox. I'm not gonna get Ocarina of Time again. I played Ocarina of Time on Nintendo 64. I had the gold cartridge. Then when GameCube came out, I got Wind Waker or something, and they included for pre-orders the Master Quest edition of Ocarina of Time. Then I had a Nintendo DS and 3DS, and they had Ocarina of Time on those consoles. They had the 3D version. I think one of the virtual stores had a version. So I played it multiple times, and like serious playthroughs include the original one, and and then the Master Quest thing. I remember playing Star Fox and getting all the badges on like every level, and when I discovered the Land Rover, level and stuff. So there are different paths you can go on if you take different routes and stuff. If you get Gold Star on like one level, it opens up the possibility for another level, and so this game probably has high replayability, but I think you can beat the whole thing in like an hour, and a while since I bit my cuticles. I used to bite my nails and my cuticles, and then around 2011 I stopped. So I'm currently in a graduate program, except it's go at my own pace. So rather than having weekly assignments, like I could do all the assignments in 1 week, which is kind of what I did, and that allows me to, it, and it's also like all you can eat buffet. So if I finish one course, I can go right on to the second one, and so I had completed 17 courses at Saybrook, four more at Seton Hall. I was actually enrolled in some courses, and they kicked me out 9, 10 weeks into the semester. It's a 15-week semester. They kicked me out in the 10th week, 11th, 10th or 11th week, and I only had one more major assignment at a paper, and then a couple more weekly discussions, and a couple more what they call pre-unit reflection questions, and I had 100 average in that course. So after I was determined after Saybrook to find another program. This is something I was passionate about. I was dedicated to this topic, this field, this industry, and when I got into the other program, I had already completed 51 credits, so now I was going to do another 48, and it was a little, I was willing to do that. But if you were to say, okay, now do another 60, I'm not really on board with that. So what I found was a master's, the shortest master's I could, in order to apply for a PhD program. And the PhD, once I'm doing that, I can inform healthcare policy through research, and And if I have a master's, I can teach. I could be teaching at this point, but they have this commercial for Nugenics on. I'm attempting keto again, and the last time when I was doing keto in 2023, my testosterone was on the high end of normal. It was 660, and that's double what it had previously been. So maybe I had, which, there was about a 10-year gap between my testosterone um, levels being taken. So I thought testosterone went down as you age. Here it doubled. And no supplements. I feel like I'm being erased from time, though. That's partly why I'm recording some of these things. I had a dream last night that that Matt guy was complaining to some higher entity just because I don't have a PhD. That how come I can't get into the club here? And I don't want to associate with these people. First of all, that individual specifically, he didn't like me when I first interacted with him through World of Warcraft, so I didn't know him in person. He went to Islip High. He's from Islip, so we didn't know each other in high school, but we met each other through a video game called World of Warcraft, and he had some like attitude towards me in the game. About 2 years after we met in game, we met in person, and he wasn't the friendliest to me. I made the attempt to be friends with this person. We hung out a whole bunch. We went to concerts and ball games and whatnot. But after a while, I felt that this was a one sided relationship where he took advantage of me. He didn't treat me well. I didn't like him. He didn't make me feel good about myself. And so I tried to distance myself from him. Then one of my close friends died, and I, was looking for comfort. And I went back to this, social group that I had, distanced myself from. And so now I have fully distanced myself from that individual. And so I don't know if that dream has anything to do you know, um, with my court situation where, people might say, don't blame other people for your problems, or, just something where um, they refuse to believe the truth that in 2016 I chose to pursue my career and familial goals. I was taking care of Shelby. I was going back to school. I was working. I was living on my own. And I wasn't associating with my friends. I was meeting new people at the dog park. And I moved to Colorado and whatnot. And, I'm a person who was awarded for good behavior in grade school and high school. And I was an honor roll student. I was awarded with grants and scholarships. I was on Dean's List, honor roll, and I have a BA in biology. I had an employment history, and I had eventually gotten into a clinical psychology PhD program, which it's not a status thing. It's what I want to do thing. Like I want to be like I would do it anonymously, um, as long as I can just be in harmony. I'll say, as long as I can be congruent with my work, in harmony with my work. Um, it's what I want to do with my time, and I feel I have put enough into it where I deserve a master's, and that could at least allow me to generate income right now. Right now I'm in debt, and I'm taking on more debt to acquire more training in order to pay off the debt, and that seems stupid because I had a disagreement over critical race theory. My current assignment is about, what are the drawbacks of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, you know. That's my assignment. And at Seton Hall, I had a book by Daryl Wing Su that said, you know, adverse reactions by white students to the framing of critical race theory should be expected. And he didn't say critical race theory specifically, but this multiculturalism, basically calling white people racist, has a, might elicit a response where they say, "I'm not racist." And for me, it's disheartening because I was growing up where I went to Catholic school, I went to church, and it was very family oriented, and I had an agenda of helping vulnerable and marginalized populations. I had this, it was kind of indoctrinated where I thought I had more advantages. Well, actually, I I feel that I earned my opportunities based on merit. My curriculum, they told me Shaman was exempt from New York State standardized testing because they displayed academic excellence. We probably had the same curriculum because my sister, she went to St. Anthony. She took the New York State Regents, so that means her curriculum most likely similar to public school education, and with the addition of religion, and it's not like I'm taking history with a religious bias or anything. There's a separate course from that. I took European history and I took religion, and there was a lot of overlap. And we talked about the Calvinists and the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople and you know Battle of Hastings, 1066. That's European history. Um, so what was I saying? Well, I guess in terms of critical race theory, I wrote in a paper. I said, I said it's like the scene from Community where Britta and um, Annie are trying to get people to support, you know, the whale. There's some sort of oil spill, and they're trying to raise awareness and funds, and they're fighting. They're yelling at people, and somebody yells back at them. No one is on the other side with this issue. Like nobody's. Like I feel like I'm not for the oppression or mistreatment of individuals. So it's a little condescending critical race theory where like they're presenting it where like, do you know that these people are being mistreated? I can, um, some of, racism, Jim Crow laws stuff were taught to me in school. And, but I held an attitude, I felt like, racism was on its way out, that my generation was more tolerant and inclusive of other people, and that we didn't really need to be lectured um, where you don't be racist. And I was kind of I took an attitude like I hope once the older generation dies out, so will racism. And well, according to Finkel and Baumeister, right, that's a social psychology textbook. I believe that those are the authors. They said like most most of like psychology is like fads in social psychology, with the exception of the civil rights movement that took place in the 1960s and then again in the 2010s, and that could be because of the advent um, of social media, where now the minority voice has something to amplify their voice. They have a platform where they can advocate for themselves, and so I wrote how like these things drudge up past depressions, and that's part of the reason why I was dismissed from Saybrook, because I went to a lecture. I want to inform healthcare policy. I went to the Seton Hall School of Law and studied health and hospital law. And after I completed my studies, I was enrolled in the Saybrook PhD at the same time, but I completed my studies at Seton Hall School of Law. And when I went to a conference in Pasadena for Saybrook, there was a lecture on analytical psychology and policy. I attended this thing thinking I could, improve my communication skills with policymakers, where I could become a better writer at informing policy and having policymakers adopt my agendas and whatnot. And it turned out to be a half-baked presentation on Carl Jung, and then a presentation on critical race theory. And some girl got up and she started crying. Someone who I used to associate with talked about the show on Netflix that had like jihads and stuff. And later on that day, I saw a couple girls in the elevator, and they were talking about it, and they said, "Yeah, some white girl got up and cried. Why was she crying?" And I originally drafted an email to the professor, and I wanted to share my experience and my perspective, where I was going to say that white girl was crying because she might have been crying because, as a white individual, we feel villainized by, by critical race. I'm not articulating all that well, where we want to help you, and like the way this issue is being framed, it feels like we're being held accountable for past oppressions or current oppressions, and you're alienating someone who was on your side. I was on your side, and so I asked if he could, basically reframe critical race theory. Actually, my email didn't turn out the way I wanted. And he says, "Who are you to tell me what to lecture at critical race theory, the residential learning experiences?" Well, as it turns out, this guy's a retired adjunct professor, so his involvement in the school should be null, should be nothing. And it kind of takes away from the whole therapeutic relationship, because I thought the whole point of the therapeutic alliance was to gain understanding of the person who you are interacting with, to gain perspective from your client's perspective. And, people are from different backgrounds. And so, like, are we supposed to be expected to know everything? Are we all knowing? I mean, there are things in Newman and Newman that talk about, learning by observation. I have some cultures, the children are, they learn by observing and stuff. And I feel like when those lessons are taught, it places a multicultural emphasis that there are some differences in how we are raised and learn and stuff, but it doesn't emphasize racism. And when I type in, like, when I look in the Sue book and you type in white and black, there's a ton of hits for those words. Like, is it possible to teach this without multiculturalism, without saying white or black? Because it seems to reduce multiculturalism to white and black, rather than like white and Jewish, different religions, I guess. Jewish people are white, right? For the most part, because it's remarkable that Sammy Davis Jr. is a Jew, right? Which is a word I avoid saying. What, you can't say Jew? Entourage. Their friend who was in prison comes and joins them. And, "You taking us to the Jew agent?" "Hey, we don't talk like that." Oh, I forget his name, but he was in The Wire and stuff. So the dismissal from Seton Hall is totally egregious. Um, I don't, that's a weird phrasing. It was totally egregious, the dismissal. I was dismissed on some vague allegation of sexual misconduct. It's currently an investigation in the Department of Education. Um, but what I feel like in my life is that people are looking at me and they're like, that kid, when he was growing up, he was probably like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. Ah! Just screaming and just throwing tantrums and in the store and stuff, and just being a total brat, and like, who can contain this kid? How are we gonna teach this kid a lesson? And I feel like the good-natured and well-intentioned individual that I was is being erased from time because the predominant feeling right now is one that, I'm not worth a spot in heaven or something. And it's disappointing that I can't control the information about me on the internet. I've attempted to correct any errors and stuff, but I'm the victim of police violence. I'm, the victim of false imprisonment and medical malpractice. And the social contract that I enter to, we have a system that, awards people damages for harms they experienced. Um, and as someone who was spent their entire life working towards the career in healthcare, it not only undermines my efforts, um, where it might make my efforts seem reflexive to my experiences where I'm learning all this stuff to defend myself. No, I shouldn't have to use my education to defend myself. It should be for the betterment of society and other individuals' well-being. But it undermines the ethical integrity of the medical profession, where if you're allowing people to violate the doctrine of informed consent, if you're allowing people to just, have total disregard for another person's wishes, it's demoralizing because how can how can this be allowed? Like, how can you allow a person to mistreat another individual to the point where they're claiming mental torture and whatnot? So in the textbook I have, Furrow et al. Health Law, it says the doctrine of informed consent developed out of strong judicial deference to individual autonomy, reflecting a prevalent belief in American jurisprudence that an individual has a right to be free from non consensual interference with his or her person, and a basic moral principle that it is wrong to force another to act against his or her will. So, that last part, a basic moral principle that is wrong to force another to act against his or her will. That should stick out, This principle was articulated in the medical context by Justice Cardoza in the often quoted language in Schollendorf v. Society of New York Hospital. Every human being of adult years and sound mind has a right to determine what shall be done with his own body. I think that's a great quote, but I think it should be more heavily emphasized for those who are not of sound mind, because you might be creating dysphoria for that individual. I wrote a paper on gaining empathy for one of my consciousness courses, and you might have a person who's experiencing delirium, hallucination, who might be in a coma or something, and the way you approach them might might exacerbate their symptoms, might create fear, might create dysphoria, and you should be cognizant of how you interact with those individuals. And so all this stuff about safeguarding yourself, that's all well and dandy, but you have the mind where you can just walk away from danger. This person, it's in their head, or it's in their head, and it could be also external where they're afraid. I mean, how how often have we heard about someone who would rather overdose? The old Pulp Fiction thing. Can't take it to hospital. I don't know if they said that, but they have the injection and stuff. That person would rather die than go to a hospital for fear of like incarceration and stuff. Um, so there's an external threat where there are individuals who will, might cause harm to you or something, and those threats are more real than some of the experiences in these individuals' heads. Maybe I went on too long talking, but an individual has the right to be free from non consensual interference with his or her person. It's also battery. Patient autonomy in medical decision making is the underlying principle in all consent cases, whether based in battery or negligence. The doctrine of battery protects a patient's physical integrity from harmful contacts and her personal dignity from unwanted bodily contact.